Genuinely real honour to be here. Emily and I and our family started going to family camp week one a few years ago, and kind of Sizewell's become a bit of a place of pilgrimage for us. And I really love the phrase, Pete Gregg likes to whip it around a lot, that the Celtic kind of monks used to use about having thin places where you just feel God's presence is so close, and I really feel it's a thin place, and it's a special privilege. I know Emily knows lots and lots of you. I know a few of you quite well, and a bunch of you here were at my wedding, and it's been very cool just journeying with you guys over the years. And just special thanks out, shout out to Robin, who is just such a wonderful bloke and has been a special part of my family's life. He has taught my children so much about farming and nothing about health and safety. And it's and swimming in his barley is the highlight of my kids' summer. So that's we love it. So thank you so much for having me here. If you don't know me, my name is Dave, married to Emily. We're sharing and speaking this weekend. Sorry if you've seen this yesterday, but some of you are new. I can't tell who was here yesterday and who wasn't yet, but if you're new today, very, very welcome. Very, very quickly, this is what my family looks like, hopefully. There we go. This is our family. We have 4 of our own biological children, Matilda, Max, Maggie, Maya, and we have 2 long-term foster children that were placed with us about 8 months ago, Marcia and George, who are a very special part of our family. Occasionally we do a bit of respite, so if you ask me how many children I have, especially if a child asks me, I have 6, 7 children. Has that got no, sorry. They get out, I'm sorry. But it is true. It is true. Thursday morning I woke up and I had 6 children to look after in my house. Thursday night I went to bed, I had 7 children to look after in my house. This is actually our life. We're talking about faith over this weekend. The title for this talk, which was suggested by Emily, and she seems to think I might know a lot about this, be a bit of an expert, is faith and failure. Faith and failure. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where that goes. She said, I just thought you'd have a lot to talk about it. Very quickly, blasting on through our vaguely who we are. This is where we're based. We planted a church called HSC Southampton in an estate called Weston in the corner of Southampton in Easter 2024. We've been doing some community work on that estate for a few years before then. Years before that we lived in Manchester and did some church planting and all sorts of fun things up there. Weston is it's always a bit of a league table and we get quite competitive about it, but generally Weston ends up right up there as the most deprived area of Southampton, but the only part of Southampton with a beach. So there you go. I carry that cross for Jesus. I go to all these estate ministry kind of like meetups, and everyone's just there being like, oh man, I had to dodge 3 bullets before I left my house this morning. And I'm there saying, well, I went for a swim. It was delightful. So if anyone feels called to estate ministry, you know who to call up, because this is the place to do it. But we love it. We have a community centre called the Hope Centre where we try to bless the socks off our community, and we want to really be the people that meet the needs of our community and show them Jesus' love and proclaim the gospel along the side. I feel like and there's a picture of our church next that meets in. Next picture, please. That's our church. It's a bit raucous. It's a bit wild. We're very used to heckles. We're very used to interruptions. Sometimes people just wanting to make their own point halfway through a sermon. So silence will kill me this morning, and feel free to heckle, and don't just let it be Emily who's tearing me down. All join in. All join in. Anyway, faith and failure, because apparently I'm the expert. A little bit of a story, I guess my life, and hopefully there's enough failure in it to show you that there's a reason why I'm speaking about this. I'm from a town called Hastings. Anyone heard of Hastings? 1066 and all that. What a town, what a town. very privileged to grow up in Hastings. Just a bit of context as to how my mind is wired. When I moved away from Hastings, age 19, I went to university in a place called Bangor in North Wales, partially because my sister was there and I had a child and wanted to be around the child, partially because it was conveniently 7 hours away from Hastings. I love Hastings, but in my head it was quite an intense small town of 90,000, but where there was, everyone just seemed quite connected. There were multiple generations kicking about in one place. You had to be careful who you dated, etc. And that was my understanding of a small town until I met Emily. And now we visit people, and you know, we just have conversations like, oh, I hear Neil and Rebecca, Neil and Rebecca are buying a house. And Emily's like, I've been in that house. And you're like, okay, that's... Right, so I'm learning about the small town vibes. But I grew up in Hastings in a Christian family, and I went to a good church, a lively church, good Bible teaching church, proper kind of 90s worship, the works. It was great because it was the 90s, so that made sense. If you're going to whip out... Yeah, preach. There's a season for everything, and that was the season for that sort of worship. Anyway, I've always felt I've known God in some way. I've been really privileged to do that. My youngest memory, my youngest understanding of just the world is I've always felt there was a Father there that I could speak to. As I closed my eyes to go to sleep at night, God was just there. And I've always been able to pray to my Heavenly Father. And I got baptised at about the age of 14. Like a lot of people, I got into various things in my teenage years. One was drums. And the rock and roll side of things and the partying side of things around it became part of my story. I started pursuing the wilder side of things. I tend to err to that. I'm also just an incredible hypocrite, just so you know. And if anyone can go wild during the week and hold it together on a Sunday, it was probably me. But I ended up pursuing a bit of a lifestyle that wasn't just damaging to me, but it was damaging to quite a few of the people around me. My life changed in a massive way one day when I was 16, and I came home from a Christian youth camp, and I'd been out in the summer, and I remember my mum arrived at the church, and before she kind of picked me up, she went over and spoke to the youth pastor for a couple of minutes, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? And then he comes over, and it's like, Dave, I just need to pray for you, and prays a wonderful prayer over me, but I'm thinking, why me? I might be the anointed one, the next leader of this church. What is this? God has spoken. But he prays for me. I leave a bit confused. I get in the car. I'm driving home with my mum. She pulls over after about 100 metres and says, Dave, I've got something to tell you. Your dad's left. And kind of everything changed in that moment. It was the start of a messy few years for me and my family. My dad came and left a few times. Once it was on my 17th birthday. Once it was Christmas Eve, and it was just acting in a way that you knew this is unhelpful to all of us, that I had to kick him out on Christmas Eve. And as someone who was happily already pursuing some things, you don't need much more of an excuse age 16 to go a little bit wild. So I could still just about hold it together in a church on Sundays, but certainly went my own very selfish path. And I went away to university. In my third year of university, somehow I'm in a church service and I just feel convicted to pray a prayer that I had avoided praying since I was a child. I remember so many times lying in bed at night being like, I'm never going to pray this prayer to you, Jesus. And it was, God, I'll do anything you want me to do. I don't know where it came from in that early in my third year of university. I don't know what caused me to say that, but I knew that I meant it. And then over the next 6 months, by the grace of God, my life fell apart. The patterns of behaviours, especially in the area of kind of relationships, they really caught up with me. I'll spare you the unglorifying details, but I got to the point that as I left university, I was just broken. I was absolutely broken. I remember at one point, you know, when just spiritually stuff catches up with you, and you've got to come to reckoning with your own sin. Some of you might have had that kind of moment. I remember there was a period of about 10 days that I literally only had about 90 minutes sleep combined, which is amazing what your body can do, isn't it? But I was just in that distress. I was sleeping for about 15 minutes at a time, then I could go for another 24, 36 hours, just wrecked. I remember going to pick up my university degree and walking down the corridor where it was, and it was mounted on a wall, the grades, and I remember I could only look down. Physically, I could only look down. I was that spiritually broken. I was just ashamed of everything. And I remember the effort it was to look up and see the grade on a board. The grade was fine, by the way, but that's nothing to do with it. But the sin, the shame, was just there, and I had to look straight down again and kind of wander off. And my worst times in my life were showers. I love a good shower. Showers are the best times, but when you're in a shower, you're kind of alone with your own thoughts a bit. And I had this kind of weird paradox thing going on where I was just tortured by my own thoughts and just what had happened and what I had done and the mess I had caused. But then I'm kind of hoping if I stay in here longer, there's something in just like washing myself. Hopefully I can be clean. I just want to be clean of this mess that I'm in. And it didn't quite happen like that. And I was just, they were just the torturous points. Anyway, shortly after arriving home from university, a friend of mine, my best friend, who had very sensibly gone and become a builder rather than going to university, so he had money. And he knew I had shame and he had money, and he knew there was a Bible conference about an hour from our house. And he said, Dave, you're going to drive me to this conference. I'm going to pay for your ticket and I'm going to pay for the petrol and you're going to drive me. And I said, all right, Miss Daisy. But we did. And I drove him there. And throughout the week of this conference, I felt this Heavenly Father that I'd always known trying to speak to me and keeping on speaking to me. And I didn't really like it. Because I'm like, why on earth are you speaking to me? Why on earth are you downloading to me? And he kept on pointing out, there's about 6,000 people in this room. It's a big old conference. And he kept on pointing out one pastor that I knew from the church I'd grown up in. And it's like, go speak to this guy and tell him you don't love me enough. Me? Me say that? You don't God, I thought you knew everything. Do you know what I've done? Do you know where I've been? Do you know how broken I am? So I spent a whole week playing cat and mouse with this pastor. If he's on that side of the room, I'm putting 6,000 people between me and you. And that's how it works. And then on the final session of this conference, I'm sneaking out to go to the toilet at some point, and in the corridor, there's just me and this pastor bumping into each other. 5,998 whatever people in the room, just us. And I was like, I've got to do it. And I pull him over and say, look, I feel I've got a word for you. Very sorry if it's so far wrong, but here you go. And I gave it to him, and it brought him to tears. And he said, that's just exactly what I needed to hear. That's exactly what I needed to hear. So he started crying, and I started crying. I go back into the conference, and I just wept. And that's the first time in my life I truly understood what grace was. And grace isn't just I can screw up and Jesus died enough for me to attend church again, maybe even be able to stand up straight again. Grace is God can see your mess and then say, I can still use you. I can still use you. And that transforms just everything, absolutely everything. And so my life got wild in a good way in the next few months. So within 6 months, I was in full-time ministry, playing drums and telling people about Jesus. That was a lot of fun. I actually achieved my life dream of, this is for a certain generation. So I actually got a music video of mine on Kerrang TV, which for a moment was cool, and then YouTube became everything, and now it's nothing. Now to explain to people how cool it was, I have to kind of give a history lesson in technology, and suddenly I'm not cool anymore. I'm just very old. But ended up, achieving that was my one dream as a teenager, get my video on there. We did do that, but in the bands I ended up doing this with, and we worked with some guys in Manchester called the Message Trust, who were wild in a brilliant way as well. My band was an associate of them, so we were based with them, and so we did lots of schools work with them, and then we got called into, we really felt that we should tour the secular rock scene. And so I spent lots of time in very dingy, quite scary nightclubs, playing our music and proclaiming the gospel. And in that space, and actually just this wasn't going to be part of my talk today, and as I was praying earlier, I felt God just wanted to include it. We played a gig in Swindon because we were really glamorous. And the promoter was a Christian, but we were the only Christian band playing. And our front man, he preached the gospel in a way that we'd never seen in a secular setting, and we were so proud of ourselves. We walked to the stage and be like, did it. Yeah. We did that. Look at us. We know people that wouldn't preach the gospel that powerfully from a pulpit. Boom, let's do it. And we walk off stage, and the promoter's mum is there, and she is in her early 60s and uses a stick to get around. Quite a fragile lady who loved going to pop punk versus hardcore gigs. That's what they were called. And she walks up to us as we're all smug, and she says, God says what he said was brilliant, but it wasn't enough. And we're like, ooh. Do you not know that no one else preaches like that? Do you not know that there's no one else who's as bold, especially in secular settings? We've not found them. We'd love it if there was more. And we spent the next kind of weekends just praying about what that might be. And we just found God really took us to another level. And he wanted us to preach bolder. He wanted us to have more faith in miracles. And he really wanted us to make space for the prophetic in our secular shows, which was pretty wild. And all I can say is we found a God who speaks in the darkest of situations. I remember being in a rock club in Camden in London, and had a wall that was just covered in, I think, centerfolds of Playboy magazine. And so just a wall of boobs. And I remember just praying over this broken teenager there in front of all these boobs. But because that's where God loves to show up. And actually, I think he likes to shine most brightly in the darkest darkness and speak most clearly amidst the mess. And I really feel that's something for you guys here today, actually. Taking him really into your secular settings with real boldness, I think he'd like you to have. Anyway, keeping on going with my story, Emily said I like to talk about myself, but she also told me that this should be very story-based. So you're getting a lot of story. But I met Emily. We get married 7 months later because Emily's pretty intense, and it was a bit of a take it or leave it deal. Yeah. Looking back, I'm like, thank you so much, guys, for coming to my wedding. You didn't get a lot of notice, did you? So that's really lovely. And we get married. We, being quite intense, we helped plant a church congregation halfway through our honeymoon. A year later, when we're just about to have our first child, we took over said church congregation. We were given 20 people and said, well, it would be lovely if you can grow this to about 40 or 50 from September to January, so that in January you can plant out again from it and someone can take over your congregation. So it's like, right, double in size in 3 months, so half of them can go. All right, so we got involved and that happened, and it was great, and we led that church for many years. It was pretty intense. Student to young professional part of Manchester, super high turnover, had to train a bunch of worship leaders and preachers every year, and we had to keep on sending out church plants from that. That was a real privilege to do it. And then at some point God calls us to lay down church leadership for a while and move to Southampton, which we did, not really knowing a lot about Southampton. I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I was a bit of a ministry brat. I'd kind of come back to God, worked in evangelism, led a church, and I'm like, but how does the real world work? And God was gracious enough to get me a job in the careers service of the University of Southampton. So I learned how lots of real worlds work, and that was brilliant. And we served students there for a while, and then over COVID, God called us to our amazing, amazing council estate with a beach called Weston. And we moved there initially, running a community centre. Emily had just started working for a Christian charity, so I gave up my university job, did the school runs for the kids, and started delivering Dominoes in the evening so I could run the community centre during the days, which was great. And then we planted our church, and it's been pretty wild, I won't lie. Pretty wild. Well, that sounded like a so-and-so. My ministry CV isn't bad. It's really not bad. Maybe the highlight was I accidentally played drums for a guy called Matt Redman once, and I was leaving my house on the way to a prayer event. I didn't know anything about it really, and someone rang me and said, Dave, the drummer's been sick. Bring your sticks. And so I walked up to the stage when I arrived and just saw he's actually quite a nervous guy. And saw a very sweaty and nervous Matt Redman who said, oh, thank God, kiss over there. And we had a nice play. The one song he said he really, really liked the way I played was the song that he did not write. So that's... But there you go, it's still a highlight. My ministry CV isn't bad. And I could tell you all the highlight reels of it, just like an Instagram grid. I could point to all those bits, but just like the Instagram grids, ignore the times where you have to, your car breaks down on the side of the motorway, or your child soils himself in an inconvenient time and place, or you're poorly and all that kind of stuff. Everyone always posts the I'm expecting pic on Instagram. No one is filming them as they're being sick for the 10th time that day, anything like that. Actually, I missed some quite lovely highlight reels I'm very privileged to have lived through. There's been some tough moments and a lot of darkness. There's lots of terrifying moments, lots of just want to quit moments, and there's so much stuff that I've done wrong. So much things. Every single period of my life I go back to and probably give you 100 points as to what I wish I could do better if I went again. Any achievement that is there and worthy of celebrating is by the grace of God and by me not getting in the way too much. And just talking about faith and failure, I felt God really called me to a particular Bible passage, and we're in Mark chapter 9, and it's just after the disciples have just done some failing, and Jesus steps in, and a guy has some faith. And in Mark chapter 9 it says this: when they returned to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd surrounding them, and some teachers of religious law were arguing with them. When the crowd saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with awe, and they ran to greet him. "What's all this arguing about?" Jesus asked. One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, "Teacher, I brought my son so you could heal him. He's possessed by an evil spirit that won't let him talk. And whenever this spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground. Then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast out the evil spirit, but they couldn't do it." Failure. Jesus said to them, "You faithless people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought the boy. And when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a violent convulsion, and when he fell to the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth. "How long has this been happening?" Jesus asked the boy's father. He replied, "Since he was a little boy. The spirit often throws him into the fire, into water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us if you can." "What do you mean if I can?" Jesus asked. "Anything is possible if a person believes." The father instantly cries out, "I believe, but help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that the crowd of onlookers was growing, he rebuked the evil spirit. "Listen, you spirit that makes this boy unable to hear him speak," he said. "I command you to come out of this child and never enter him again." Then the spirit screamed and threw the boy into another violent convulsion and left him. The boy appeared to be dead. A murmur ran through the crowd as the people said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and helped him to his feet, and he stood up. Afterward, when Jesus was alone in the house with the disciples, they asked him, "Why couldn't we cast out the evil spirit?" Jesus replied, "This kind can only be cast out by prayer." And the verse I really just want to hone in on today is verse 24 today. It's how the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Now this verse stands as the centre of a story that's filled with pain and filled with confusion and filled with unmet expectations. And just like we could all probably give a highlight reel Instagram grid of our best moments with Jesus, all of us here would have a bunch of times when there is pain, confusion and unmet expectations. This isn't a story of triumph, it's a story of struggle. And that's exactly where real faith so often begins. So, just to get you all excited and commissioned, my first point today is going to be our starting point is failure. Our starting point is failure. This story opens up with failure on every side. The boy is suffering. The disciples have tried to help him and they've failed. The father has watched hope rise and fall too many times. Even his faith feels like a failure. When Jesus asks if he believes, the father doesn't answer with confidence. He answers with honesty. He says, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." In other words, "Lord, my faith is mixed with doubt and my trust is tinged with fear. This reminds us of something humbling. We rarely begin our journey of faith from a place of strength. We begin from weakness. We come to God not as people who have it all together, but as people who know we do not. Whether you've quite got to the place where you can't physically look up or anything like that, we come to God knowing we don't have it all together. That's why I love doing council estate ministry, to be honest. We left a big church in the suburbs of Southampton that had lots of money and lots of fancy cars in the car park and lots of people and wonderful worship. And people said, why do you want to move to this estate? Why do you want to go there? And I look at that mission field and I looked at the mission field I was leaving and I was thinking, flipping heck. Why do I want to stay here? How hard is it to reach people with long driveways with 3 cars on it and houses that I can never afford and jobs that give them respectability and all the holidays? They think they're fine. That's hard. That's hard. Take me to the place where brokenness is on the surface. But take me to the place where everyone knows each other's mess and you can't hide from any of that. We all know each other's shortcomings. That's a great place to the gospel because the brokenness, the failure is on the surface. You see, failure is not the end of faith. Very often it's the doorway into faith. For my own story, of course, I had that super low moment at the start of my journey and God showed up. And I've not been to that place of shame from my sin again, but I've had lots and lots of time again, moments knowing I'm not enough. I'm not enough. And God says, I know you're not enough. Let's do something. Quickly turn to the person next to you and say, you're not enough. And then you can reply and say, that's the point. Our starting point for faith is our own failure. But that's the point. And you need to know that if you want to try something that's big of faith. I can feel the faith that's bubbling in this room. You've seen God do something in recent years and you want to do more. You want to see what he's doing. You want to be faithful to it and you want to be bold and go out. And possibly part of the reason why I said some of the slightly more extreme things that we did, especially as a band, that seemed quite relevant earlier, is when we were seeing miracle after miracle, and I'll say more about that tomorrow, or just God do these incredible things and stepping out in such faith. Sometimes if you're doing those things, you can be a bit like, excuse a sporting analogy, but you know, on a football team, there are your kind of steady eddies who cover all the ground, and then there's your flair players who they'll pop up for a moment and win the game, but they drop off for a bit afterwards. They pop up at key moments. And if you go for the really extreme faith things, sometimes then you're going to have to drop off a little bit afterwards because you can't sustain that. You can't, but it's in those moments where there's a particular vulnerability, spiritual vulnerability. That's when the enemy can get in. That's when lies can come in. That's where a simple slip up, you say the wrong thing in a conversation that seems to cause a lot of harm, or you parent your kids badly, or you slip up in a habitual sin that you thought, oh, I'm so over that. What are you talking about? Last week, you know, there was revival, and now I'm back there. What's going on? We end up in a low point of our mess again. We get, I think the best person in the Bible to remind us of this is Elijah, just after he's done his fire fall down moment, and then he's in the wilderness just saying, God, take me. Depression's completely taken me out. And just as a chucking in there, I think mental health can actually be quite a big part of this cycle as well, learning how to sustain and look after ourselves through that. And that's certainly been my story as well. But if you're going to step out in faith, you're going to end up in points where you feel like a failure again. But that's okay, because our starting point all along was failure. But if you are in that failure point, your life might feel like an awful mess. And that's okay. Because my next point is, faith makes the most sense in mess. Faith makes most sense in mess. This is not a calm, orderly moment. I can't figure out whether Hopton is calm or orderly or wild. It seems to be a bit of both. I don't know. But this moment with Jesus is a chaotic moment. There's a child suffering. I have 6, 7 children, and when they are sick, it ruins your life a bit. Tim Keller always said, you can't be more happy than your least happy child. And it's so flipping true. So flipping true. It wrecks you once you realise that. And in this story, we've got a desperate father. And we have some very confused disciples. And if you're new to the Bible, meet the confused disciples. This happens a lot. It's a bit of a theme. And there's a crowd watching. And into this mess, Jesus talks about faith. We often think that faith belongs in neat testimonies and answered prayers. But Scripture shows us that faith usually actually grows in disorder, not in our control. It's in hospitals, and it's in gravesides, and it's in broken relationships, and it's your own mess from sin, and it's in unanswered prayers. Anyone here got some unanswered prayers? That's where it grows. It's in exhausted hearts that faith becomes the most real. This father does not come to Jesus when life is stable. He comes when everything is falling apart. A frequently asked question as a pastor who likes to do a bit of apologetics and evangelism is so many people coming to me saying, how can you believe in God when there's so much brokenness and so much mess in the world? And I always have to flip it and say, how can you face all of this without the hope that there might be a God in control somewhere? I personally need him more and more the darker the world seems to me. Faith is not pretending that mess is not there. Faith is bringing the mess to God and saying, I refuse to face this alone. I need you with me in this. And like I said, Emily and I have had some very dark moments and tough moments along the way. Come speak to us afterwards if you want more of our dark moments. But we literally, one of the things we felt called to do, we moved to the council estate. That was tough. That took 18 months. Emily's dad died along the way. That was pretty brutal, as we had some packed boxes. We had to live with another family for a bit because we couldn't transition there straight away. Everyone in this 11-person house caught COVID. We moved out into an Airbnb because we couldn't stay there any longer with COVID. The Airbnb started to leak from 2 bathrooms, and we had 3 a.m. have to call out an emergency plumber whilst the house is dripping with water, and we all have COVID, and it's all drama. The handbrake went in my car the next day. That was kind of messy. Felt called to extend the house with our inheritance, which is a terrible thing to do on a council estate because you will lose all your money, but God said invest in Weston, so we did it. Got screwed over by cowboy builders who said whilst we just had some spare walls on the outside, bare walls, they said the money's gone. Suddenly had to become our own labourer and work every evening on it. We had to pray in £2,000 or £3,000 or £5,000 a week to get it done out of nowhere, and God did come through, which was crazy. The biggest time of blessing, in terms of just financial gifts of our marriage ever. But it doesn't feel good when you've got to do it the next week. It's dark and it's stressful and it's scary, but it's in that place that you get to go to God and say, you are enough. I don't have enough. All I can see is this mess, but I know this is what you want to shine through and reveal more of yourself to me. Faith works best in mess. But also, and this is just what I'm going to end on today, it's in those moments you get to pray really good prayers. But sometimes a really good prayer is something like, God, I thought you were better than this. Am I allowed to say that, elders? I don't know.
We do.
Because, because, true faith asks questions of God, and that's my final point. The Father's words are not a statement, they're a question in the form of a prayer. He's saying, help me overcome my unbelief. He's asking God to deal with what he doesn't understand about himself. And this is important because true faith isn't silent. True faith asks questions. True faith, it wrestles and it admits its confusion and it dares to bring doubts into the presence of God. If you ever rocked up to church on a Sunday morning and everyone else seems to be going for it and you're just like, I don't even quite know how I'm going to survive this week, and God, you do not feel close right now. Am I in the right place? You are in the right place. True faith brings your doubts into the presence of God. Throughout the Bible, God's people ask hard questions. How long, O Lord? Do you really care? Psalm 22, quoted by Jesus on the cross. Why have you forsaken me? We're allowed to say this stuff. Are these signs of a weak faith? No, they're signs of a living faith. The Father does not run from God because of his doubt. He runs towards God with his doubt. And Jesus doesn't rebuke him, he answers him. Here is the hope of the passage. The healing doesn't wait for a perfect faith. It happens in the presence of an honest faith. And I love that this story ends with Jesus saying, this kind of demon, and by the way, if you want to learn more about, demons and spiritual warfare. Speak to Mark, I'd love to. He wants to do nothing else on his lunchtime today. But Jesus kind of gives this kind of cheat code thing at the end that's like, oh, here's the solution. This kind can only come out with prayer. And then you read the passage and you're like, well, where's the prayer? Where is the prayer? What is this amazing prayer that trumps all the demonic? And that's when Jesus comes through and acts. Well, the prayer is this: I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. That's the powerful prayer. That's the cheat code prayer. So today, if your starting point feels like a failure, you're not disqualified. If your life feels messy, you're in the right place to meet with God. And if your faith is full of questions, God is not offended. In fact, that might be some of the most powerful prayer you can ever do in your entire life. Because sometimes the most faithful prayer we can pray is not, Lord, I believe perfectly, but it's, Lord, I believe, but please help me. Help me in my failure. So I'd just like to end with praying for you. I don't know how you're going to close after that, but if you'd like to get to some kind of position where you're just comfortable receiving, I like to pray. Or say hi to you, mate. But I like to pray for you because I have real faith for you. I love getting, every time I meet Mark and Neil, they're always kind of prodding me and Emily saying, what crazy thing are you doing next? So exciting. And you can sense, though, when they're excited. And they're very excited right now. And I know lots of you are really excited. So, yeah, Father God, I just lift up my brothers and sisters in this room. Thank you so much for them. Thank you so much for the journey that they have been on. Thank you that you are planting seeds of faith right now. But actually, I think over the last few years, you've planted a lot and you've been watering them. And Lord, what an opportunity for a church that's been in a place for a long time and witnessed for a long time, but to have a fresh faith, a fresh vision from you, not a man vision, not a let's do the right thing that someone down the road did or someone in America did, but a vision that says, God, you've told us to do this. Help us to rely on you. And Lord, I just pray you've released that faith. Lord, I pray you've released gifting upon this group of people. I pray that you would raise up leaders for the right tasks in this group. I pray for just a family of grace as they step out and they try and they fail, and that they would be the people that would get alongside each other and say, no, this is okay, because failure is the starting point again. We can do this. And I pray for some bold prayers. I pray for people who've been in this room who've been believers decades. I pray that this next season of prayer for them would be the deepest they've ever been with you and the most real. I pray for people who are just getting their head around speaking to you, Lord God. I pray that they would be able to stand on the shoulders of people who've gone before them and go into greater places with you than people in Hopton had ever imagined. Lord, release faith. Heal up the wounds of disappointment. Heal up the wounds of brokenness. Lovingly bring sins in the surface, up to the surface, Lord, that need to be dealt with, because you love us far too much to leave us where we're at. You're a God that loves to bring freedom. And release your good things upon these people. In your mighty name I ask, Jesus. Amen.